Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to episode number, yes, I'm going to look, 73 of the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. I'm your host, Jeff Welton. We're going to cover, so the official title is Winterizing at the Site, but we realize a lot of folks are from areas where you don't necessarily have a winter like we do up here in the Great White North. So we're going to cover it as seasonal maintenance. All right, to talk about this stuff, I've got a good friend, mad scientist. He's a broadcast integration specialist with Wisconsin Public Radio, the one, the only Mr. Alex Hartman.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Alex. And the funny thing is, so we started this TTT series just a hair over 2 years ago now.
Yep.
I'll say we're episode number 73 because I skip a week here and there or several weeks here and there. And Alex was one of our first guests, and coincidentally, we were talking about maintenance and seasonal changes. So I may or may not have borrowed one or two of those slides, but hopefully your memories are at least almost as short as mine. Having said all of that, oh, and I've also discovered that the item on the desk, which we'll be referring to shortly, can't tell the difference between Alex and Alexa. So this could be a really fun day. So Alex,
For those of you who have one at home, you might want to mute it.
yeah, or unplug it because I'll be referring to that quite a bit in a little bit. Now, Alex, one of the things that you have, and I have talked about before is you're kind of, I guess, a unicorn insofar as you've been the factory support guy, you've been a station engineer, you've been a contract engineer, now you're an integration specialist with Wisconsin Public Radio. You've kind of worn most of the hats.
Yep. And now my latest is, like you said, broadcast integration specialist, which is layman for IT guy.
Yeah. And so one of the things I was joking around as I started putting the slide deck together, and one of the other things you do, you are the, I guess, creator of gadgets and gadgets and things to make things do things. So we refer to that as the mad scientist role. And relative to that, I'm happy to be Beaker. But Curtis mentions in the comments that Google Home is the better unit, and that may or may not be true. I've got no reference to Google, so other than Google Assistant on one of my phones, which is not bad.
The argument is Google may be better at it, but Amazon paid a lot of money for the integration, so it's everywhere.
Well, there's that for one. I mean, I've got it on both phones. I've got it in my truck. I've got it in the house, so I don't have to worry about where I am. Somebody's
Right.
always listening.
Yep.
I did discover that Siri, and here's one, so somebody listening, throw a comment in here and we'll hit the housekeeping side first, just for anybody that's new. But if you've never been to one of our webinars, we try to make them as interactive as we humanly can. So you do have the enter question for staff. I guess we're staff, yay. But if you got any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, things that come to mind, type them in there, hit send, and we'll make them part of the progress or process. Also, if you've got a microphone and you're not shy, hit the little hand wavy icon. We'll unmute you and make you part of the discussion. Let's see, is it possible for us to see the other listeners' comments? And the answer to that is no, the GoToWebinar platform doesn't let us do that. Now, having said that, when you logged in or when you registered originally, there was a space there for questions. And I do make the questions public. So I refer or delete all identifying information, but just so that comes up that way. Otherwise, the comments that come in, I will read them as I see them. And I try not to be too editorial about it. I mean, unless it's full of profanity, I'm pretty much going to read it as it comes up on the screen. You never know, I might read it as it comes up on the screen. Anyway, sorry, boss. It's the way I roll. One other comment, if you're an SBE member, then write this down in whatever device you use for recording your certification points, because this does give you half of a credit toward recertification. Uh-oh, I hit Alex's magic code word there. But
no, actually, it's someone at the door.
Oh, there you go. So that's the kind of thing we're working with. So where I was going, and I mentioned this, and this is why I went here. When I was doing the prep work for this session, I discovered, and one of the questions, and I'll hit it right now, was favorite calendar app for keeping track. And for me, it's Alexa. I use the thing for everything. I've got lists for groceries. I've got lists if I'm going to the hardware store because I'm working on a project, I'll make a list. So the reason I brought it up is because I've got a iPhone for the work phone. Anybody who knows me on Facebook knows my opinion of that, although I'm learning to tolerate it. Anyway, and it's like everything else. It's not that it's good or it's bad. It's that it's new and scary. But the thing I discovered this morning was that Siri does not support lists. And that's one thing that that Alexa does really well. So I can say, like, Alexa, make a monthly maintenance list, make a yearly maintenance list. And well, we'll just unmute it and give you an example. So Alexa, make a list for monthly maintenance.
That was monthly maintenance, right?
Correct.
I've created monthly maintenance list. What would you like to add to it?
Change fan filters.
I've added change fan filters to your monthly maintenance list. What else?
That's all, thanks.
Okay.
And then from there, it's easy enough to, Alexa, set a reminder for the first of every month at noon.
What's the reminder for?
Check the monthly maintenance list.
On which day of the month?
The first.
Okay, I'll remind you on the first of every month at noon.
And there you go. So now you've got your reminder set and you've got your list. And the cool thing is, if you work with a phone, for example, you can access it there. You can access it through the app. You can go in and manually edit and add things without having to do the whole dictation thing. So Alex, what's your favorite toy for remembering to do stuff?
Believe it or not, lately it's been Outlook. A lot of people have moved to Outlook 365. Comes with a great calendar app. Just set yourself a monthly recurring meeting, essentially, to do exactly what he just did with the Alexa app there. And all of us are tethered to our phone. We may not have those gizmos and gadgets installed because work policies or whatever to get to those lists. But the Outlook stuff works amazingly well for that.
Yep. And you can get, I mean, I'm running Office 365 on work because, of course, we're an O365 facility, but I've also got it on my personal devices. I think it's like $6 a month or something like that.
Right.
And the cool thing is that I can integrate stuff to both my personal and my work accounts. Now, we do have restrictions. I can't access work email from my personal device, for example, but I can get to my OneDrive from either. So, there's ways to share things. Dennis mentions Outlook tasks. So yeah,
Outlook
again,
tasks,
exactly.
depending on the platform, I will say. Microsoft has done pretty good with the 365 platform. However, the web app is much more capable than, say, the Mac app. So things like the tasks aren't available yet in the new version of Outlook. It's coming soon, has been for years. The PC version's probably got it, but the Mac version doesn't. The web app has all. So you kind of pick and choose your poison. But for us and as a team of engineering, we use these reminders in Outlook as to check these things quarterly, monthly, weekly, whatever, engineering logs, your weeklies you got to do for EAS and such. But then we keep them all in a Google Drive shared sheet that we all have access to, and we sign off on each other's tasks if we did it or they did it. So there's no question if the job has been done, management can go in and say, oh, okay, we're good.
Right. And I mean, the cool thing is there are infinite ways of doing it depending on what you like. I mean, like in-house, we use SharePoint for stuff like that. Because I can throw a spreadsheet up in SharePoint and people can go in, you can have multiple people editing it live. And, so it's just convenient like that. If you're a one-person shop, I'm a big fan of this guy. I've beaten the drum on this a bunch of times. It's a Rocket Book by Everlast. It uses a gel friction pen. It's erasable. The cool thing is at the bottom, number one, you've got QR codes where I can set a summary of what's on this page and then scan the code. I've also gotten, this is a new camera, so hopefully it'll see it. It may not. Almost. At the bottom, there are little icons. And you color in the little icons depending on what you want it to do, whether you want it to send it to OneDrive, save it to email, or whatever. And then when you scan it with your phone, it'll do that, whatever it is. And I use that in conjunction with a program called Evernote, because Evernote gives me the ability, it's just a note-keeping program. So I can scan this document direct into Evernote. It does OCR, so I can search my text. I can save photographs if I wanted to take a picture of a busted fan belt, for example, things like that. So, there are umpteen out there. Those were the ones that I happen to use the most.
And like many of us out there nowadays, you're a one-man shop trying to take care of 20 sites. One brain may not be enough. You may have to have two. Um, so
You're forgetting the third brain.
that one's been full for years.
My running joke, I told somebody once, I said, the bucket is full. So when my wife looks at me and says, I need you to remember this, I said, absolutely, can do. Do you want me to forget your birthday or our anniversary? That doesn't meet with the same sense of humor as it has in my head. So I don't know.
Right.
Anyway,
Right.
but yeah, exactly. There's, and you can, depending on what you're using for electronic devices, a lot of times sync them together. So a change on one, and this is where like the Office 365, or whether you use that, Google Sheets, Google Docs. And, we kind of beat the drum and poo-poo the cloud at the same time, but being able to have this stuff cloud-based with local backup, all synchronized, means I can change it in any one place and it changes in every place.
So you showed off yours, and mine is the phone itself. So I'm a big fan of the Samsung Note series, have been for years. And now they got rid of the Note moniker, but now this is the S22 Ultra that comes with the pen. So what I tend to do is, if I'm working on something, you're ripping something apart at 3 in the morning, take a bunch of pictures and you start drawing pictures on it. That size screw goes there. This is where I put that, so on and so forth. And it just stays right there. And then that way you have historical record, because again, you can sync this up to like OneDrive or whatever, and those photos with those notes will end up in that document. So it's good, if someone comes up behind you, what did you do? Well, go look. So document everything nowadays is kind of the key.
Well,
because
and
our brains are so full that we can't remember our own names half the time. So the digital world has helped us out in that respect.
Right. Beyond that, it's one of those things where, how many times have you put something down in a place that'll be easy to find and then come back 2 months later and you haven't, it's a catchphrase around here. I can't find it anywhere. I mean, and anywhere is usually the most obvious place. William
This is why I
mentions in
buy
the
the eight.
comments.
I buy the 8-in-1 screwdrivers by the dozen, because I'll put it down and 30 seconds later the thing's growing legs. So
Yep. I've got picked up. By the way, for what it's worth, I've got having a brain. Exolite. I've got a blue-handled Exolite 8-in-1 that has just been amazing. I picked it up in auction for like $3. So I think I'll be getting onto their website and paying full price for a couple more, because good bits and convenient. So one everywhere. William makes a note in the comments that when Real Boss is old enough, she'll be glad I forgot the year of her birthday. And all I need to remember is the date, month, day. I don't need to know the year. No, that's irrelevant.
Right.
All right. So the things we want to talk about, I mean, it's going to vary a lot. And this is the one thing I say more than anything is you need, I can't tell you what's best for your sites. You can tell you what's best for your sites. Now, having said that, there are some things that, if you've got a generator, you need to be testing it. And on a regular basis, which reminds me, we've got a hurricane coming up the coast and supposed to get here Saturday. So I probably should check my generator at some point, because
and have a maintenance schedule for said generator. Not just test it. When was the last time you replaced the battery, the air filter? Did you purge the lines? Change the oil. Basic things. Whether you have a maintenance contract with a company that does it, or you're the handyman that gets to do it. But make sure you have a log of that, so you can go back and say, oh crap, it's been like 2 years since I changed the oil. you
Yep.
know.
Yep. And I mean, I've got like for mine, what I do when I change the oil, and I do again with the Evernote app and the Rocketbook, I can take a photograph of the runtime meter on the front of the generator, so I know how many hours it was when I last changed the oil.
Sure.
And being lazy, I'll usually hold an oil can up beside the runtime meter and take a picture of both in there. Now I know exactly what that picture refers to. Curtis mentions it puts places or things in a safe place that's so safe I don't even remember where it is. And I mean, you know, what do they say? Layer one security in the IT domain. If you can't get to it, you can't lose it.
Right.
But I guess it depends on the definition of lost, but that's a whole different discussion.
It's just
So,
unintentional placement.
but this is, and talking about redundancy, which is the first thing on the list of things to cover, and generators and backup systems in general, seasonal changes, fall, and a lot of people reference when we go to daylight savings, like clock changes, if you're in an area that does that. And that's a good just reminder, you know, change the batteries in your smoke alarm. Maybe every fall, change the batteries in the controllers, anything that has batteries that needs to be changed on a regular basis.
Mhm.
Generator full, and this is something that should be done more often than once a month, but you need to test all of your backup systems on some sort of schedule. I mean, you could have a backup STL, but if you never test it, how do you know it's going to work?
Right.
So what, I
Things
mean,
like that. Those are
yeah,
the big ones. You know, it's like, and you know you're going to test them, and you know everybody says, you know, I've got a generator. Cool. When was the last time I tested it? Cool. Last week. Oh, cool. Did you actually transfer load? Well, no. Why would I do that?
then you didn't test it.
Then you didn't test it.
Yep.
So make sure you transfer load, and make sure management's aware that you're going to do that, but don't tell anybody else.
Hmm.
Because you're also looking for the reaction factor, and if there's some human training required of, oh, no freak out, uh,
Yep.
jocks and PDs are like, well, we dropped off for 10 seconds. I'm like, we live in PG&E territory, right? This is normal. So you
Right.
got to test that stuff.
So run and joke, when I first met the real boss, of course, she was living down in Red Wing, not too far south of where Alex lives. And I was at her place one day, and she'd gone to work, and I was just working from the house and getting some stuff done. And I'd never been there the first Wednesday of the month before. Turns out they test tornado sirens. We don't have tornadoes in this part of the world, so all these sirens are going off, and I'm wondering what do I do, you know? So yeah, like you say, you do need to test on a regular basis, but it's also a training opportunity as well.
Hmm.
Now,
And if you know that you have problems with your backups, those are things that, if it works 99% of the time, is it really a backup?
right, it depends, and so that's where you come down to what's the value of your off air time worth? What's your budget? You
Right.
know, maybe 99% is good.
Right.
So it will vary from one to the next. The other thing to look at is, I mean, and again, if you're testing it on a regular basis, and I'm going to use the obvious example because I'm a transmitter person, but when you buy a new solid state transmitter, you keep the old tube rig. If you're not running it on a regular basis, then the tube gases up, and when you go to fire it up, it either goes bang and doesn't work, or it you know doesn't sound good, or
Well, bearings and
so
blower fans, they just have to
that
move.
they seize up and get a little squeaky, or they don't turn at all, which is usually
Yep.
not good. Airflow
Or
switches
you
don't like it.
or you find organic fuses, the hard way.
Hmm.
Things like that. Here in the Midwest, winterizing / seasons changing, big things like the leaves falling. Well, it looks pretty sure. You know what gums up an air vent really fast? Leaves. Um,
Hmm.
Same thing in the spring when they're plowing the fields. The dirtiest thing you'll ever see is a furnace filter at a wall on a plowed cornfield.
Yep.
It's pretty nasty. Or the cottonwoods getting up.
Well, and
Stuff like that.
cottonwood was a good example where, and this is something else to think about. Your seasonal maintenance may vary from one
Hmm.
part of the year to the next, and Cottonwood is a great example because last time I was through in June, I think it was,
Hmm.
I stopped by a bunch of sites because that's what I do. I have more fun looking at transmitters than I do selling them. But I took pictures of a bunch of air filters, and I post them online, and everybody's, oh, look, they're so filthy. They didn't do any maintenance. People got to, and it's like every single one of those filters had been replaced 2 weeks before, and I happened to come by on the time for the maintenance run to swap them out again.
Right.
So, yeah, and I mean, now that's 2 weeks, but cottonwood season, that's normal.
Yep.
The rest of the year, they
When
might go 2, 3 months through
fall
winter.
harvest, when they're doing feeder corn, it gets all the dust up and it gets pretty nasty pretty quick.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things. Now, and this is the Midwest. Now let's use the hurricane example. In hurricane season, I don't live in a hurricane zone. I live in a tornado zone, so I got to make sure my trees and stuff are trimmed away from the guy wires and stuff like that, so nothing falls on those.
Yep.
Granted, a 2x4 flying at 120 miles an hour will go through anything, but
Hmm.
things that you check, storm shutters, generators, obviously. One of the things on here, content delivery. Right now, look at what's happening in like Puerto Rico and the islands down
Yep.
in the Caribbean. Um, are you really going to rely on the LTE system in a hurricane? Probably not.
No.
Things of
So,
those kinds of nature. So if you have like a solar system for management, a power offset, or if you're off grid, how do you maintain those? I'd love to entertain some questions of those kinds of facilities. Like, share with the group here what if you've got a solar installation or some kind of alternative power, wind, what's your method of testing?
right. And not only method of testing, but like solar would be a great example because as you build up the airborne crud and pollutants on the
Mhm.
panels, the efficiency decreases. So, what's the schedule for cleaning? How do you decide?
Mhm.
Do you monitor
Who
efficiency?
doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. Couple of comments. William mentions main equipment always runs better when there's a good backup to take its place. And that's true enough. It's like insurance, when you've got it, you don't need it. When you need it, you don't have it. So definitely, if
But
you've got
yeah,
a known,
it,
tested, working backup, you're probably going to need it a lot less. And the funny thing is, the reason is because it means you're doing the maintenance. That means the main won't fail to begin with.
right. And I mean, there's certain things that are out of your control, power grid or telco or whatever, that you can only do so much with. So that's where these backups come into play. But in broadcast, typically your backup transmitter, for instance, is usually the one you just replaced 5, 10 years ago. Well, how many times do you have it turned on? And then we go back to that. Things
Right.
of those natures.
Yeah.
And then you've got in the summertime for us anyway, here in Minnesota, and I'm sure a lot of places around the country, we have 2 seasons in Minnesota, winter and road construction. Road
Hmm.
construction also coincides with municipal projects.
Yep.
So, double check, triple check your STL shots. Is there a new water tower, a new high rise, a new apartment building, something coming up in the way?
Hmm.
Uh,
No, it could be
that
something
happened
as
several
simple as a
times.
crane. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Ray makes a good comment here too. Good idea to test ground system once a year. And he was referencing a story I'd told of a station ground that had come completely disconnected. And my last trip out, I was in Nebraska and happened by a station and took a 10-second video of me wiggling the ground connection, the compression connection, all the way around the ground rod because it had loosened up.
Hmm.
So yeah, lightning is a big fear in the South, and he's right. I mean,
Hmm.
again, what you look at and how often you check it will be quite situational. I know Dan Gunter's listening in. We've had Dan on before, and Dan sent me a picture that'll show up. Won't be in today's, but it'll be showing up in my lightning protection discussions. He sent me a picture of a surge protector that had lost all three phases of protection, and it did let him know that hey, this ain't right. And he opened it up, and you remember you were talking organic fuses. Well, this was a case where I think the components, well, it's a surge protector, they're designed to fail, so
Hmm.
it was sacrificed, and but he didn't lose anything in the building. So
Right. I
that's
mean,
kind of the goal.
that's the number one thing people ask me too is like, how do you know the surge protector is working? I was like, I don't know. Well, the day
Well,
you find out it works, okay, worth every penny at that point.
the short answer is I can't tell you when it is working, but I can sure tell you when it's not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I mean,
Exactly.
and that's a matter of degree too. You know, I mean, if it's not, if it is working and you get a mother of all lightning strikes, then odds are that you could potentially lose some stuff anyway. So definitely, it's it's just a matter of if you're not spending a lot of money on a
Right.
routine basis, then you're probably doing it right.
And
Uh,
as we come into the fall time here, for those with AM arrays, this is a good time of year to start thinking about ground clearing, getting the brush out of the base of the towers, clean the tower site, but do all that, the weed barriers, and get some crushed rock out there if you need to redo that. If it's in a swamp, here in the upper Midwest, we actually wait for the ground to freeze and then we send out the guys with the bobcat and the brush cutters. Um,
hmm
it's a lot easier when you got 40 acres of water. But
Yeah.
you know, those are the things that you gotta, that's a winterizing item for us too.
Yep, and I see a bunch of people on here from the center of the country where ice tends to happen quite a bit, and
Mhm.
so little things like here's just a homebrew ice shield over a home heat pump.
The AC, yeah.
But check your ice bridges. I've ran into a situation not long ago where, for whatever reason, tower crew had been through replacing a chunk of line. They'd removed the ice bridge and it was sitting on the ground under the chunk of line. Well,
Mhm.
that's not going to do you a lot of good if that 1,000-foot tower starts shedding 2-inch radial ice, and it's hitting terminal velocity.
Yeah, I mean, other things that, a lot of companies now for insurance purposes have to do tower inspections. What exactly is on your inspection request list of your tower crew? Everybody's a little bit different. I mean, the first thing I ask for is obviously joints, paints, welds, so on and so forth. But one that I've started asking, and it took me a number of years to realize, because it was like, time flies when you're having fun, right?
Mhm.
So I was like, hey, can you go check the static cats and the ground rods for me? I asked that first time ever the other day because I had put them in 10 years ago.
Right.
Or the Philistrand at the top of the tower. Can you tell me the status of the Philistrand? Take pictures of it because I'm going to have to start budgeting a replacement.
Yep.
In a
Now,
bad lightning year, the static cat could turn into a ball of hot mess.
about a month or two, I guess it'd be about closer to 2, maybe 3 months ago, had Todd Loney and Pete, blanking on your last name, Pete, sorry, but had a couple of guys on and we were talking about tower maintenance specifically. And in that webinar, I referenced a website that I can't remember, getting old sucks, but
You're the brain.
yeah, well, that's it. You can find it in the slide deck for that webinar. So if you go back to the view from 1,000 feet webinar from a couple of months ago, there is a link in there to a website that does give you all kinds of suggestions for various checklists for that sort of thing. So yeah, that's a really good idea because that's something. I mean, out of sight, out of mind, right? The tower
Mhm.
typically, as long as everything's working, then
Right.
who knows anything
When
about
you
it.
remember to go back and look at things you did 10, 15 years ago when it's 500 feet over your head.
Yeah. Now, and this is something, and this conversation has come up more and more over the past couple of weeks, so it's still relatively fresh in the adult brain. But it's a good idea to have somebody sweep starting at the transmitter output connector and heading up to the antenna, but just sweep the line and the antenna with a TDR. So you've got a reference point. Do that while everything's working well. And then if anything goes sideways, then you know exactly what you did have before
Right.
and that was also referenced in that tower maintenance thing. The cool thing was just last night, somebody was mentioning the nano VNAs, the little vector network analyzers,
Once
and
over there.
yeah, just glorified SDR. But
Mhm.
you can get, and I put a link in the Facebook chat last night, but you can get the code to turn those into a little rudimentary TDR.
Mhm.
Is it going to be as accurate as a $5,000 pro grade? No, it's not, but hey,
It
it
gives
might
you an
save your
idea.
bacon. And
Yeah.
for $100, it might give you a better idea than not. Yeah.
And I believe Dielectric has that new one that you can do inline with the
Hmm.
system active. So,
Yep.
if you've got a few bucks in the budget, probably not the worst idea if you're in a, like the mention of the Tiger Mountain fire, for instance.
Yep. And that was
Probably could
something
have
else
saved a
that,
bad day.
right. And that's something that Ray mentioned. Check the pressurization system and alarms because, yeah, if you start losing pressure because of a hole in the line, and
Mhm.
I made this point I think last week, but Dan Fogel is working on a troubleshooting series of webinars with SBE. So if you're an SBE member plus member, you can certainly get the archive versions. I think he's going into version 3 next month, I believe. So, definitely to check those out because he's using some real world examples like this sort of thing.
Mhm.
Uh, let's see, Greg mentions have a site with through the wall AC units and have had to wrap them in hardware cloth to keep out rodents.
Yep.
And that is a really good point. Critter proofing at this time of year, they're starting to find places to hide for the
Yeah, they're
winter.
going for the warmth.
Yeah,
If you got like barred units or the on walls that have the open coils on the bottom and stuff like that, make sure you check that hardware cloth because they eat it all summer too.
yeah.
And eventually in the fall they get desperate enough and keep going.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember with stuff like that, anytime you put hardware cloth over an airflow path, you are restricting airflow to some extent.
Hmm.
So just pay attention to that. In that example, it's not going to be critical and it's not that big a deal. Other thing to remember is a mouse can get through a hole that's about a 1/4 inch in diameter. So
Hmm.
definitely, yep, it's a really good thing to pay attention to.
Yep.
Oh, look, checklists and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Again, my real boss is the guru of checklists around this place. I am the one who ignores them, and usually to my regret at a later date. But this checklist manifesto is a pretty cool book when it comes to that. I forget who linked that to me now. I wish I did remember. If you're in the audience, tell me, hey, I told you about that, dummy, so I can give credit where credit is due. But it's a great book for people that are trying to get organized and have not historically been really good at it. Um, I've currently got my workshop, which is on the other side of this wall, totally disassembled as I refloor it and get into the progress of trying to create some level of organization.
My
Coming back
office
to
is
the
in a
being able,
perpetual state of cleaning, so
yeah. Well, and it's the whole coming back to the being able to find the stuff when you need the stuff,
right,
because I've got plumbing, electrical, electronic, woodworking, and I need to break it into sections.
right.
So I'll have a little department store down here time I'm done probably. Um, now we got mentioning generators before, and generators are also situational. Whether you're running gas, propane, or diesel,
Mhm.
it's all going to require different things. So we can't give you a do this all the time. But what are some of the high points, Alex, that you can think of that are typically forgotten? Like the one that comes to mind for me, diesel, is fuel conditioning.
Yep, fuel
Uh,
type matters. If you're using propane and if you're in the Northwoods, it gets below 30 below. Propane don't like to move. Things like that. So a lot of guys go to diesel, but diesel gels up. Okay, well, if you're out in the boonies like a lot of people are for the transmitters, natural gas isn't an option, or
right.
gas. But make sure that, if you're going out there and there's a power issue, say you do go through a winter storm, that ice comes down, takes out the power pole and your generator don't start, it might not hurt to make sure you have a warm battery sitting in the house with you.
Yeah.
Because you're
And,
gonna
uh,
bring that out there and you're gonna try and start that generator that's now freezing.
and that's something else that's worth mentioning. If you're in a really northern climate that does get to minus 30, and thank goodness here on the ocean, we don't get below 0 Fahrenheit on a hardly
Or
ever.
even up in the mountains,
Yep.
it's 90
But
down there, but it's 10 below up there.
I've been in Colorado Springs when it was 80 degrees and it was snowing on Pikes Peak. So, yep, exactly. Uh,
Mhm.
so the thing to remember though, if you get into an area where it routinely hits those temperatures, odds are that your gear has got block heaters, you can get tank heaters, battery
Mhm.
warmers, all those things.
Other
They
things
all
to check.
require, they all require electricity, and that's fine because I mean the power goes out. Well, it was warm right up till the power went out, so the generator should start and run, assuming it's been regularly tested and maintained.
Yeah, the mouse
But
nest and the air filter is not going to help you.
but again, those are the kinds of things that you need to be checking on a fairly regular basis that are easy to overlook. Because I mean, when
Yeah,
was the last time you thought to check a block heater to see if it was working?
right. So I mean, generator maintenance is a big one. What I typically do is contact local companies. If it's a recent generator install, they'll have a service company that'll come out and do their little checklist. Ask for a copy of that checklist for yourself too. See what they're doing and see if they're missing anything that you may have caught, which 99% of the time they've thought of everything. They built the things. But
Yes.
the transfer switch is the big thing that a lot of people overlook. You're worried about the fluids and all this other stuff, the radiator, make sure you got good solid hoses that aren't dried out. But I've had transfer switches stop me dead in my tracks because you got to throw a broom
Mhm.
handle at them.
Yep.
Because they just seize up. So make sure you're exercising your transfer switch.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to do it, if you've got the ability, is to pull the mains into the building and just let the generator and the transfer switch see it as a standard or routine power failure.
Hmm.
But that does come back to where, relative to the primary entry point, do you have the generator connected?
Right.
So, again,
These are all
situation.
preventative. These are all
Yeah.
preventative. And of course, every things can happen between visits, right? I mean, I know of a certain company that only checks their sites required quarterly. Well,
Mhm.
that's actually quite a bit of time, especially in a place that changes seasons quite often.
Yep.
You show up in the spring but you don't show back up till midsummer and it's 100 degrees out. A lot has changed.
Yep. Yep. And that is, again, one of those situations where, I mean, only you can figure out what works for you. And it will depend on your budget, what your off air time is worth or, costing you.
And that's
So,
and that's the key to have for the engineering staff out there to have that conversation with management and figure out that dollar amount because that's how you're going to justify your generator costs, the maintenance, battery backup systems, how regularly you change out, like if you got flooded cell whole building
yeah.
UPS,
And I
those require
mean,
regular maintenance.
right. And it will vary. I mean, you take our little community station out here, for example, and a lot of our listeners at any given time are not mobile, they're home. And
Hmm.
so they know that if the radio goes off the air, that they can go to the web stream,
Hmm.
and so for us, although we'd like to have a generator up on the hill, it's a little less critical than if you're in a station where 75% of your audience is mobile for the money making parts of the day.
Hmm.
So, again, very much look at your situation, know what the off air time's worth and what the priority is relative to the on air
Right.
stream or whatever.
Right. And, as is pointed out, I've gone mostly full-time IT now, and our backups are built in at the onset. We
Mhm.
don't deploy a new system unless there's two of them.
Right.
uh, you know, because of these types of things. They're done at the onset. Not a lot of broadcast looks at it and says, well, that's not how we do it. It's like we'll get a backup after the first failure.
Yep. Yeah.
You
There's
know,
the saying about the horse in the barn door.
right.
But
So
yeah.
you think it depends on, do you require a generator? Some people may not. Some people
Right.
it may not be applicable. Like I have a site that is too close to the Mississippi River. I'm not
Mhm.
allowed to have a generator per the DNR.
Right.
The site is physically too close to the watershed. They will not license it for me.
Yep.
So I have to use
And I
batteries
mean,
best I can.
and that's like I said with us. I mean, we've got a solid stream that most people can access if the transmitter site does go down. So for us,
Mhm.
it's the studio is more important to have generator backup than the
Right.
transmitter site. And yeah,
And
it'll
this-
vary a lot.
right. And then we get into this, the winterizing part. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize, it's there, but I don't think we talk about it enough, is you need to have someone know you where you are.
Yep.
Make friends with your local sheriffs and police department and say, hey, this site is unmanned. You know, we only go up there once a month, quarterly, whatever. But if you see the gate open, if you could tell your patrols to come on back and check on things every once in a while, that'd be great.
Yep.
You know, tell your wife or kids or something, hey, I'm going out to this site. Here's the address. Write it down. Text it to them. They've got phones nowadays. You know, so someone knows where the hell you are and why you didn't come home that night.
Well, and that comes back to, and I mean, we've done the safety discussion a bunch of times, but it bears repeating. Uh, I beat the drum about not working alone as much as you possibly can. And I mean, I get it in this industry, there's so few of us that there are going to be times when you're out there alone. But at the very least, you know, I mean, I tell folks, I've got folks that'll tell me, yeah, I grab the GM and bring them out to the site with me if I've got to do any late night work or do some like alone time on.
They don't have to know what you're doing. They just have to be able to know how to turn the power off.
I said they need to know two things. They need to know where's the breaker and how do you dial 911.
Yep.
You know, and I think most of us are pretty good at the 911 part by this stage of our lives. It's nice if they know CPR. And I mean, this doesn't have to be every time, but out of the engineers I know of that have been found at a transmitter site, and it's terrifying to say there's been a lot of them, more than I can count on one hand for sure. About half of them didn't get electrocuted. They weren't killed by the equipment. They tripped and falled or had a heart attack because, well, none of us are getting any
Shoveling.
older, or younger rather, shoveling. So, you know, that's where the person with you, they don't need to have any electrical experience at all. Yeah, so Curtis made a joke. I'm going to pass on that one. It's like I said, I will edit occasionally, but
That's funny.
but understand I'm laughing in the background. And now
So you
everybody
bring
listening
one
at
and
home is
one
like,
with
oh,
you.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah, thanks, Curtis. Now I've totally lost the train of thought. But
Right. But I mean, you know, along with these checklists, these are the important things that day to day, every time you go to the site, doesn't matter the season. You
right.
know, personal AEDs have gotten so inexpensive, and the training is almost required by law now for everybody who touches this stuff. I mean, if you got an air compressor compressing your line, it's technically a pressure vessel that has to be registered with the county.
Right.
You know, those kinds
And
of things.
that's one of those things that we've historically been, well, I mean, of course, a lot of these rules grew up around us. I mean, radio's been around for 100 years now, quite literally. So, yeah, a lot of that stuff is something that if you ever brought a building inspector out there, there'd be a lot of things that needed to change. So
But again, it's one of those things where I have sites where we actually have like an Ingersoll Rand 26-gallon upright air compressor to compress the lines. When was the last time you purged the valves on those? Get all the water out of them.
Right. And I mean, you know, I mean, my home compressor, every time I stop using it, it gets shut down and purged. But that's just that's my routine. And
But it's a set it and forget it type of thing for these transmitter sites where it's off in the corner. When it kicks in, you know.
Right. Yep. Yep. So definitely, again, the little things. I've got the slide up here is talking about batteries. And one of the things people don't think about is if your air conditioner, for example, or your heat pump or your whatever you've got, mini split has got a remote control. The batteries in that need to be swapped. Some of them will not work or they're out of reach on the head unit if it's way up high. So making sure the remote works can save you some grief.
Right.
Smoke detectors and CO detectors are the obvious one. Multimeters, again, usually they give you a battery indication, so do transmitter controllers. But all this stuff, UPSs, those things should be on a scheduled battery replacement cycle. Because
so I've got some new toys that I want to share because we like doing show and tell with this kind of stuff.
Oh, cool. What do we got?
So my new favorite thing, everybody knows I have gadgets, right? I build gadgets, I do gadget stuff. So there's a company called Aquara, A-Q-A-R-A. And they make sensors, and it uses the Zigbee protocol. Okay. And this one in particular is a door sensor. So you buy a hub that connects to the internet, Wi-Fi. It's its own protocol. It doesn't use Wi-Fi, but it's like Bluetooth. It uses 2.4 gig, but doesn't talk Bluetooth. Sure. So these little sensors, and they can repeat themselves. So, you know, if you're 1,000 feet away down the building, as long as you've got one of these every couple hundred feet, they'll daisy chain and link to the one on the end. It's pretty cool. So this one's a door sensor. And these are what I've been putting in transmitter sites because we had security problems. Imagine that. Only took 20 years. But there's things like this cube. It's a gesture-based system. So all I have to do is roll the cube, and that's an action to the system to do something, like turn on the lights or change the temperature, whatever. But these buttons are programmable. They're one-button buttons. But I can go into the app and program them for triple tap, does something, so on and so forth. My favorite one so far, however, is temperature, humidity, and pressure sensors.
Oh, cool.
And leak detectors.
Yep.
But these have coin cell batteries in them, the CR2025s, I believe. So not your 2032s you would find in a Nautel or 9 volts you find in a BE, so 2025. So you got to have your assortment of batteries with you. But they're good for 2-3 years. So these are what I've been putting in everywhere, along with other things. Again, going back to other things like site security. They have a motion detector that can trigger events. So in combination, about $500 worth of sensors to outfit an entire facility, if you don't have a remote control that can do this for you, will alarm you. Do you have a water leak? You know, at certain sites that do have the luxury of water. Or even the condenser, if you put it near the air conditioner, sensing that you got a backflow problem with, a dirty hose coming off the air conditioner. Motion sensor, pretty cool. Use that in conjunction with an IP camera. You have motion. Is it supposed to be there, or is it Mother Nature? But these kinds of things, these little gizmos and gadgets. Another one that I like is they have outlets, controllable outlets. So you need to reboot something remotely, or attach this to a 110 relay, flip-flop your audio signal, whatever. They work well for this because they don't use Wi-Fi traditional. So they kind of just work, and the hub has Ethernet on it, so you plug that into your network switch, let it go through the internet, and off you go.
So Bill and Curtis have both asked for name of the company and website. So I sent a link to Akara's primary website, and
you find them all over on Amazon. They're about $20 a sensor.
And that's what I was saying. Google sent me to Amazon first, but there's your.
And they have outlets, or these are switches. So these are programmable switches, but they're also 110, 220. So you could put this on a thermostat type thing if you use blower motors. So these things have become my saving grace.
Daryl's got a good note in here too, remembering that small batteries corrode and ruin equipment. So that is another argument for doing the scheduled battery replacement. Don't just wait till it goes dead, because then you get up there a month after it's dead. So for that month, you're flying by the seat of your pants without whatever that thing did. And by that time, it's probably leaked a bunch and made a mess of a circuit. So definitely scheduled battery replacement. Like everything else, you replace it before it needs replacing, then it'll save you a lot of grief in the long run.
What I like doing is remoting those batteries if I'm in there, because you can get the external battery holders, and especially if they're circuit board mounted, because sometimes they stick, sometimes they get glued in, shipping stuff, whatever. If you can find the dummy ones that slide in and you can mount the battery external and call it the sacrificial battery holder, by all means do it.
Right. Now, for the virtue of the people that happen to watch this on the archive and don't get a chance to see the chat that we're looking at live, it's Akara, AQARA.com. So https://www.aqara.com. That'll take you to the main website, or you can just search Akara on Amazon or your.
There's also a company called Sonoff, SONOF. They make these really handy 110 relays. So you want to change lights, and it connects to Wi-Fi. So it's just kind of, it's smart home stuff, but your house is kind of an industrial facility. So,
I've moved my office here is on a TP-Link voice/motion sensor switch. Yep.
So there's all these ecosystems. Sonoff is more the open one. You can actually close this off, so you can run it like a Raspberry Pi or a virtual machine or a PC. And it doesn't need the internet to work, so you can run it locally. So these are the ones that I like for that, on air lights even.
And we've kind of segued off of seasonal.
But these are the things.
But we haven't.
It's not a seasonal thing. These are the tools that will help you. Using this 110 relay, you put that on a slave off of your breaker panel, for instance. Did the heater kick in? Yep.
Yep. Or you can, as an example, you could just use it as a power out alert, because if you set it as a
Exactly.
fail safe, so the power goes off, the relay trips, you get a contact through whatever backup UPS protected method you use.
Right.
So,
Speaking of UPSs, UPS batteries are on your list there as well.
Number one with a bullet, yes, sir. UPS is the only thing you can guarantee about a UPS is that it will fail.
Yep.
And, just like air conditioners, I mean, yeah, it will fail. So the goal is to get ahead of that.
Right.
Lubricants.
Other thing to remember about a lot of this too is that, remember, at altitude, the design level changes. So if you are in the mountains of Colorado, you have to pay attention to where your specific area is versus sea level. So here in the flatlands, we don't have to worry about it too much, but out in the Rockies, yeah, you kind of does that really work to that temperature? Well, are you at 13,000 feet? It might be a little different.
Well, and it's not just the temperature, because if you're cooling something with forced air, whether it's a transmitter cooling fan or whatever, when the air's thinner, you got to move a whole lot more of it to achieve the same end. So it's not just the temperature, it's all, the altitude impacts that. Okay, Daryl wants to know what's a good way to check UPS batteries. Yeah.
Literally pull the plug and find out.
Yep. If it changes, and see how long it runs.
A lot of the UPSs have little screens on them that tell you the runtime, and that runtime changes based on whether it's plugged in or running.
Right.
I have one that I use, and how much load is on there. So those are the ones that I recommend people buy, is the ones with little screens that will tell you that. It's directly communicating with the inverters.
So people poo-poo them, but I've got APC backups here in the house. And I mean, I've got a 50
Cyber Power. There's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah, well, this 1500 watt backups will hold everything that I'm running this webinar on up for an hour and a half. So even if we run long and the power went out right as we started, odds are we're going to get to the end.
To William's point there in the questions there, just replace them every 3 years. Yes, if you're buying the $99 ones or the $150 ones, throw them away. The inverters are garbage. If you have rack mount ones that are 2200 VA, 3K VA, so on and so forth, like holding up like a 1.5, 2.5 kilowatt transmitter, it's cheap. Those are actually pretty good quality inverters and very expensive to replace. So that one,
in that one, you do the batteries for $400 or $500 and save yourself $1,500.
Correct. There are certain ones. The ones under the desk, the ones that everybody's like, oh, well, I need a UPS. Cool. I'll go to Office Depot and pick up, or Staples and pick up the $89 thing that looks like a power strip. Do you trust your industry to an $89 box? It's up to you.
And I mean, that's one of those age-old discussions. And we had this argument on Facebook not too long ago. Somebody was growling about a Windows 10 update. And I said, why are you running the home version of Windows 10 on a mission critical system? Why wouldn't you be running not even
Windows runs a lot more than you realize. Windows CE still runs ATMs.
Yep. Oh yeah, I know it. But the point
is not that, but
CE's not updated. And there's another good point from Ray, UPS bypass units. If your UPS doesn't,
you probably have one.
Yeah, most good UPSs have automatic bypass. On some, I know on the PowerWares, it's an option. So yeah, if you don't have a bypass on the UPS, then it's a good idea to have an external one.
Right. And yes, there are certain UPSs, to answer William's questions, to replace the batteries, not the UPS. There are certain ones, like I've seen a lot of transmitter sites where they hold the remote control up with the $89 power strip.
Yep.
Replacing the battery in that is $60. The new one's $80. Just buy a new one. Yes, it creates e-waste, but chances are those little ones that are like $80, $90, the inverters are pretty junky.
Oh, the caps in those aren't going to outlast the batteries anyway, typically.
Right. So those ones are the ones that I argue to get rid of and just replace. The bigger ones, replace the batteries.
Right. Before we get to Jerry's question, just the standard weekly warning, we're hitting the top of the hour. We are going to run over because why stop now? And if you do have a hard cutoff at the top of the hour, this will be archived. On that note, we'll carry on. So Jerry had asked about winter, and I want to give a shout out too. I meant to do that earlier. A couple of these slides, specifically the ones titled Winterizing, were taken from a webinar TT2 we did on this. I forget if it was last year or the year before. We had Dan Kelly from the Michigan Association of Broadcasters on.
Mhm.
And these slides were culled together from content totally provided by the various engineers in the state of Michigan. So shout out to
Mhm.
Michigan engineers for providing us the info for doing this. Thanks much. All right. So Jerry had asked, what do you like for winterizing outdoor padlocks? And I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to that. I am a big fan of inner tubes. I mean, just inner tube and a little bit of Teflon spray and call it good. But again, we don't get to -30, and Teflon spray can get pretty thick at -30. So what do you use, Alex?
Uh, Heat guns. I mean, if there's enough ice on the lock, one, you probably want to look around at your environment. Why is there water on the lock? The lock chain.
Mm-hmm.
And correct that first. Secondly, make sure, in the fall you get the graphite gun, make sure it's nice and lubricated with the graphite for the lock cylinder to actually function and move.
Yep.
There's the lock de-icer stuff that works in a pinch, but used sparingly because it's, water-based. WD-40 I've used in a pinch just the same, makes a mess, does open them up.
Mm-hmm.
But, the lock is not, if you don't put the graphite in there and keep the mechanism actually lubricated, no amount of whatever you have is going to work.
Yeah. Now, see, Williams comments the same thing. Yeah. How do you solve your lock problem? With bolt cutters?
Mhm.
Not
There
look,
is a universal key option, and
always
you
the
get
two.
you can get a side cutter with a battery on a Milwaukee nowadays for nothing.
I've got a set of 2-foot bolt cutters in my truck toolbox. It's just a whole lot easier. Dennis makes the hear bad things about APC, and yeah, and the funny thing is UPSs are like transmitters, are like cars. Some people love one and hate others. Other people hate that one and love the other one. And like everybody growls about APC, we have pretty much standardized
There
on for
are
operating the
there's
data center at the office,
Well,
and it
there's
works.
divisions of APC.
Yep.
So there's the consumer line you can pick up at Staples or Office Max and whatever,
Right.
at the big box stores. Then there's the ones you can buy from like CDW, which are a step up. And yes,
Yep.
that's why they're more expensive.
Right.
And then there's the C grade stuff that you would find on like Amazon. It's like, well, this one's $67 instead of 150, but it's the same model.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not.
Yep.
But then you get into the enterprise. Like I have a 20 or 30 kVA APC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's 30 kVA. It's 3 racks.
Right.
You know,
And it works.
and it works.
Yep.
So the enterprise side is we're good.
Right.
Eaton, Fight Electric. There's a couple of other ones out there
Right. What's
that
that
make really
other
big
one I've
ones.
been hearing about recently? Extreme X something. Come on, you were
Yeah,
talking about it.
was it?
It was a month ago. I know you've slept since then.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the new ones
There's a
actually.
bunch.
Right, there's a bunch. I mean, what I've done at certain little mom and pop stations, we bought Tesla power walls.
Mm-hmm.
They work as a UPS. We just put the emergency panel on that.
Mm-hmm.
Done.
Yep.
Is it expensive? Hell yeah. You know what doesn't work? What works every time I try to use it? That.
Yeah. Well, it's also got a pretty extensive guarantee on it too. So
Hmm.
there's that, and that's something else to pay attention to. I mean, if a lot of UPSs, especially the enterprise grade ones, will not only guarantee the UPS for a certain length of time, they'll guarantee you against downstream damage, and some of them will
Yep.
offer to cover device failures downstream as a result of power surges.
Yep.
Now, Kevin makes a good point here too. Source the batteries when you get a UPS. Source the batteries then, and figure out where you're getting them, whether it's batteries or us or whoever,
Yep.
because you can almost always find them for less than the OEMs than buying
Oh,
through the
absolutely.
manufacturer.
Batteries plus is, a common thing here in the Midwest. I'll
Yep.
replace, a 72 volt UPS, like a 2200, which is 8 batteries in series parallel.
Mhm.
put them all together, it was like $160 versus Eaton wanting, $400 plus shipping of really heavy batteries
Yep,
for the
yep,
same battery. I
right.
mean,
One
Johnson
other
Controls,
thing,
so.
one other thing that's not mentioned in this lubricate thing is how many times have you ever stripped the nylon tuning rod on a certain model of tube transmitter where the loading and tuning coils have this chunk of nylon connecting you, and if those coil rollers seize up, then
Mhm.
bad things happen.
Yep.
So again, something else that requires fairly regular maintenance. Curtis asks, what about key lock versus combo lock? Here on the East Coast, it's not that big a deal. Again, we don't, I mean, we're above freezing most days. We don't get below zero hardly any days. So a combo lock will almost always work. Where Alex is, if you get there, then you might not get the combo lock to work unless you got a master, well, I was going to say Mastercraft, but you don't have Canadian Tire, but a blowtorch of some sort.
Yeah, there is, you sometimes do have to use some, gas, some kind of heat for them to, get the cylinder to start moving.
Yep.
Another point of reference, if you want to take up a new hobby, and then start worrying a lot about what kind of locks you're using, go find Lock Picking Lawyer on YouTube and
Oh
realize
yeah.
exactly how badly every padlock out there is ever made.
Yeah. I mean,
20
locks
bucks for a
are,
kit that I can defeat pretty much any padlock you can put on its site.
well, and like I said, I've got the 2 foot bolt cutters. So, I mean, yeah, locks are there to keep the honest people out.
They
But
are.
having said that, the other thing I use, and I don't have one, I've got a bike. I thought I might have an inner tube nearby, but I'll cut an inner tube to about 3 inches long, then cut a little, like just sort of
Mhm.
use some silicone and seal it around the hasp of the lock. So it's sealed tightly at the top of the lock and just open at the bottom to get the key in to turn it. And then it just rides up and down with the hasp. So,
Right.
you can waterproof a lock that way pretty well, as long as it doesn't get turned around so that the lock part's pointing up the keyway.
Right.
Eric mentions definitely better to roll your own with respect to battery banks. Saved a couple of grand on
If you're worried about a
on
couple of
big
$1,000, you're
UPS.
doing it wrong. Quite honestly,
Well,
those when you're getting to that size, the warranty starts paying for itself.
but again, you can still source batteries a whole lot
You
cheaper
still can. I
externally.
mean, I can
So.
I can build a 30 kVA system, but I'm the warranty, I'm the maintenance, I'm the everything. Do you
Yeah.
have time?
Well, I think he's talking replacing the batteries with like Batteries R Us versus going straight to Powerware. But
Right.
I may be
Those,
misunderstanding.
but yeah, I mean, you can roll your own UPS.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, people do it in their houses all the time. It's actually a pretty big industry now with these giant battery banks where you can get,
Right.
5 kV batteries for $1,500. That's pretty
Hmm.
cheap, with its own inverter, but
Well,
you have to have the rest of it.
not too far east of you, there's a friend of ours who's got 60 kilowatts worth of battery backup on his house. Now he's also fully solar powered and off grid, so
Yeah.
that makes a difference too. Um, and the other
Oh,
thing
that.
is, you remember this picture. So Alex took this picture,
Hmm.
and this is where we discovered that indoor wise cams will work at minus 30.
Hmm.
So, another plug for the $30 phone China, but let me see what's going on in my site, Wisecam.
Hmm.
But definitely, if you can, I mean, these days webcams, I mean, I'm talking to you on a auction by a Logitech cam that I paid $30 for 2 days ago. Webcams are cheap enough that you've got a lot of options for being able to see your site. Now, of course, it does require IP access. So,
Hmm.
how you do that's getting easier too.
Yeah,
But
that's site and situation dependent.
right. And so I don't think he made it on. I know he's doing some training today, but Shane Tobin had sent me this picture. So, yeah, definitely it's a good idea to have cameras. And also to make sure that, well, in this case, that was a Wyoming horizontal wind. So it just blew the louvers
Hmm.
open and then dumped all kinds of snow in the building.
Yeah,
But
he opened the tube cavity on that transmitter and it looked like that
yep, yep.
because the vent
And
got, because it was a hooded transmitter.
right. So absolutely. Let's see. good manufacturers for 7 amp hour and 12 amp hour batteries, tons of options. So, yep. And again,
Mhm.
who do you like for batteries, Alex? You said batteries plus?
When you're getting into the commodity side of things for the 7 amp hour, 12 amp hours, you realistically just do your homework on the internet and realize that Johnson makes a lot of them at the end of the day. They all just stick someone else's sticker on them.
Right.
The design factor hasn't changed there a lot.
Mhm.
There are certain things, why does a stick of memory from Dell cost, $600 when I can buy it on Amazon or Newegg for $50? Well, because they
Right.
tested it,
Yep.
uh, to make sure it complies. So, I mean, what I've done for the 7 and 12 amp hour batteries is, again, do your homework, follow of all the stupid things, find the Bitcoin miners and look at what they're using.
Well, I mean, they're
Because
the ones that really care about being off the air, so to speak.
Exactly. So find out what they're using, and it is a flavor of the week because these guys change their chemical compositions based on what's available metal wise,
Hmm.
at the production time. So you can have good batch, bad batch.
Right.
Everybody remembers capacitor gate. Same thing happened there.
Hmm.
So the 7 and 12 amp hour batteries, there are tons of options. Like I said, batteries plus, I don't buy the cheapest one they have, and I don't buy the most expensive one they have, and that seems to work out good for me.
Yep. Dennis mentions that the tube chimney in his HT30 didn't appreciate the same situation, also in Wyoming.
Yep.
So, yep. I mean, you get a good old horizontal wind, and we get them here. Well, like I say, hurricanes. The only difference between a hurricane and a tornado is that we spread the wind over 300 square miles instead of 300 square feet, and
Hmm.
the wind speed compensates accordingly. But and we get 2 weeks notice that it's coming. But absolutely, we get a lot of times where things going to go in through louvers. I mean, going in the outdoors, so to speak. William mentions interstate batteries as an option. So, yep. And again, pick the one you like the best. Do your research and what's available and works for you. Uh,
Just for your FYI, Interstate is also made by Johnson Controls.
there you go. So, right back to square one. Uh,
Mhm.
and Daryl mentions got one, installed it, and 1 day later it was dead. So definitely, like everything else, I mean, everybody occasionally will turn out a dud, but it can
Oh
be.
yeah.
And safety. We've talked about this already. You had mentioned the contact, having a call out
Hmm.
routine. Also have a contact list at the site posted where you can get to it in a hurry because, if you're bleeding from somewhere, odds are you're not thinking clearly. And that needs to be prominently located where you can find it without being able to think. Um, if
Yep.
you've got a first aid kit and you use something out of it, you need to make it a point to replace it. And
And
that
not when you're bleeding.
happens. Yeah, right. Well, and I mean, of course, you can always use paper towel and electrical tape. It's not like we haven't.
Again, here we go back to our beginning of the hour here, where it's what's on your list. What I
Yep.
typically do, especially with first aid stuff, is the ointments and stuff in there. Yeah, they're good for a couple of years, but through a freeze thaw cycle, chances are they're garbage now.
Right.
First aid kits are $40. Throw them away. Get
Yep.
a new one
And
every year
or
and put that on your
keep the
list.
bandages and the
Right.
non-perishables. And the other
Same with
thing,
like fire extinguishers. They all expire. You have to make sure that
right.
you're keeping up on those just the same.
Right, get them, make them part of the maintenance schedule. They need to be tested by somebody certified to test that stuff.
Correct.
And that comes back to the batteries. Batteries do have a shelf life. So if your batteries have been sitting on the shelf for 10 or 12 years, odds are it's time to replace them, whether they've been plugged into something or not.
Hmm.
One of the other questions we got in the advance was what kind of things do you like to see at the site? And I mean, our site is the one I play with in my infinite spare time is it's not that far off the beaten track. It's about 3 miles uphill both ways, just because of the gully in the middle, and it can typically be hard to get in or out of. So, you know, I tend to carry that stuff in my truck up here just because it doesn't matter where you are, you may need it. But definitely water, food. I like just little like Nutri-Grain bars or granola bars or whatever, something to keep you alive. don't have to be alive and happy. If you do put canned food in your thing, because it does last a lot longer, remember to have a can opener. Otherwise, I mean, gnawing a can opener, well, we've all seen those videos on YouTube where they scrape it on the concrete until they can beat the top off, but that just looks like a whole lot more work. Definitely batteries and stuff. This is one of those things, and I don't know who's in the audience, so I'll word it tactfully, but this is one of those things where going to some of the prepper websites can give you a wealth of information. There is some really useful stuff. And,
Candles seem to be the thing, especially in the cold sites. It's light, it's warmth, whatever you need to, if you got to boil some snow to get some drinking water, whatever. Candles, not the LED kind that come with batteries, those are dead.
A handful
But
of
honest to God,
inch diameter, 4 inches long, and a couple of 10-ounce tin cans. You've got space heater, you've got a source of light, you've got a cooking utensil.
And if you have a cardboard box that your air filters were in, cover yourself in that, put the candle in with you, and guess what? You just turned yourself into a hot box, and you can survive the night if you don't have power.
Right.
This is one of those things you find on the old Mythbusters,
Yep. So let's see. Lauren mentions started looking at first aid kits, occupational health and safety group. Brand new plastic first aid kit, all metal in the kit was rusted and each item was sealed in plastic. So definitely check those things regularly. Williams posted a Wikipedia link to a P38 can opener. And yep, that's, I'm familiar with the brand. I'll copy it over to chat just because I can. But this is what happens when they give me unrestricted authority.
Right. I mean, MREs, the food that has a shelf life, the same stuff that you're going to shove in your bunker kind of thing.
Yep.
Have a
MREs,
5-gallon bucket of that, that's sealed so rodents can't get into it.
And MREs will last a lot longer than, so here's something else to note. I can't speak for the US, but here in Canada, the law requires manufacturers to put an expiration date on things, and that expiration date can't be more than 2 years. So you'll have stuff with an expiry date of 2 years that could be good. I mean, Twinkies, Hostess Twinkies. So I'm pretty sure that if you put a Hostess Twinkie in your house in a sealed tin can and somebody came by 100 years from now and dug that sealed tin can out of the wreckage after the nuclear winter, that Twinkie would still taste the same as it did now. Not necessarily good, but anyway, point being,
those kinds of things. Well, and here in the U.S., the MREs that you can get from the military are exempt from the rules that the FDA has to do, so they don't have expiration dates.
We don't need to follow your rules. And I mean, when I was in the reserves, the MREs they were issuing us, and this was back in the 80s, but the MREs they were issuing us were Korean War surplus, dated 1950s.
Yeah, and William has it right. U.S. MREs have a manufacture date. Shelf life is determined by opening them and having people say that they're still edible or not.
Well, yeah, and if you're in the forces, yeah, it's still edible. The question is how sick you get after is more to the point.
Right. So, I mean, yes, they sell those 5-gallon pails full of these emergency kits at pretty much any, Tractor Supply or whatever.
Right. Costco.
Worth having on the site, and yes, add that to your list of it's been here for 3 years, probably should change it out.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that you can cycle it through. And as it gets closer to that time where it's due to be changed out, take it out, put new one in, take it to somebody that does a lot of camping.
Yep. And if you have really remote sites where, helicopters have to be involved, flare guns.
Yep.
The flares can go bad. So make sure that you have
again, humidity sensitive. So, yep. All right. Well, we're at 1/4 the top of the hour. Got the mandatory. You can find stuff here. So I've added a few things to the online information page. Number one, Marcus O'Rourke, SoCal broadcast engineer, does a lot of little short things, a day in the life of type deals. And if you search them out on YouTube, there's a lot of really good purpose type stuff there. So like, I can do this, I need to do this, I need to do that. Oh, look, there's a 5-minute video showing me exactly what I need to do. Barry, Michigan's the BDR.net. Don't forget the in there. So it's not BDR.net, it's the BDR.net. And of course, broadcastengineering.info, a lot of substance, a very little fluff. And the mandatory, there's a Facebook page for everything.
Yeah, I've seen some of those SoCal broadcast engineer videos. I have to say, he does better than the manufacturer sometimes.
Sometimes. Yep, I think he did one on maybe putting together the VS rec rails or something like that.
Yep.
I didn't say that out loud. Let's see, a couple of food ideas in the comments. Bill Cherry's Spam in a camping stove with foil. Yep, there you go. Hot meal in a heartbeat. Nathan, ramen noodles make food if you've got water at the site. Very true. Yep, there are a lot of prepackaged meals that, and ramen lasts forever, and it's cheap, so it doesn't cost much. Trick to it. If you've got ramen noodles, mice will chew into those in a heartbeat. Make sure they're sealed in a Tupperware container.
The packaging ramen usually comes in is not airtight, so they will go stale unless. Yep.
Yeah, not mouse proof. So
not mouse
bet,
proof.
get a Tupperware container, seal it up with and fill it full so it's displayed. William has provided a link. I'm going to copy it. William, I'm putting a lot of trust in you here. I hope you're not sending me to anything untoward, but I've got faith. Let's do a paste. Let's do a click and a right click and a paste.
And these aren't just cold weather, you know, like we said, the hurricanes down south right now and stuff like that. These are things that you should have in case you do get stuck at a site. You know, you're going out there to do,
right,
you know, what engineers do, and
there will
road
be
washes
times,
out on the way home.
right. I mean, I've had roads wash out from me, just get caught in a downpour and a rain, and the road may be under a foot of water trying to get off the hill.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely. I did miss copying the link for the P38 can opener, so we got to go back to that as well. But let's see, and we'll copy that and we'll paste that, and that should put everything into the chat and accessible to everybody. All right, on that note, folks, well, first I want to thank you, Alex, for taking the time. We're 20 after the top of the hour. We've been rocking and rolling. But thanks very much for your time today. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a while. We'll try to do it again.
Yeah. And I mean, anybody that doesn't know, Alex has been kind of a regular on here. We've known each other a whole lot longer than we like to admit to some days, because that would mean admitting how old we've gotten. But on the same talk, folks, I want to thank all y'all for spending an hour and 20 minutes of your day with us here today. And if you've got any suggestions for things we can do in the future, by all means, you get the little survey at the end, fill that sucker out, and tell us what we can talk about. You know, I mean, I'm more than welcome to take, or more than willing and happy to take ideas. All right, on that note, thank you very much, and we will see you all next time. Bye now.